Hi, Nicole.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Do you want to test your video?
Yes. All right. Can you see me okay?
Let me make sure I can. I'm still seeing your picture.
Okay. Let me see. All right. How about now?
Not yet.
All right, maybe it'll warm up. It, it's
Does
on.
it do does it do that?
No, I don't know. And I've been in meetings all day, so I don't know what's happening. Let's see.
Yeah, let's see. It says I can stop your video. Maybe turn your video off and then on again.
Okay. All right, stopping it now and then starting it back. And I can log back in, back out and back in if that might help.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, you should have video. No, your video. You should log out and log back in because your video is definitely not starting.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Sandy, is your video on?
Yeah, I see me.
Okay, this is weird because I only see your picture and I don't see your video.
Weird. I see myself.
Yeah, well, say Nicole was having the same issue, and let me
I
see
mean,
if
I
you.
only see your picture. Oh, now I see you.
Okay, but yeah, both you and Nicole, your video wasn't showing up. I think there may be a problem with the Zoom room.
Yeah, that's
Nicole,
weird.
Nicole,
I
Sandy's
see.
having the same issue.
I see Nicole. Do you
Oh,
see
do you
me?
see our actual live video?
Yeah, Nicole.
This is
I can't. I can't hear you. Oh, I can't hear you.
Well, that's good.
But I see you. Oh, now
Right.
I hear you.
Okay.
Hey,
And I
but
can see,
you see? Do you
the
see
two
my
of you,
video?
the two of you see each other,
yes.
Yeah.
and you don't see me.
No.
Well, you just see your picture.
Yeah.
You had
That
your
is,
video on a second ago.
I know, but that doesn't actually change whether or not I can see you. I'm only seeing your images, not your actual video. I wonder why.
We see
I've
each
never,
other.
I've never this.
That's bizarre. That's super weird.
Okay, I am going to log out and log back in again.
That sounds good.
Oh,
All right.
wait, no, there's a problem with that because I started the YouTube stream. So let me see what happens here. Okay, I can see you in the YouTube stream.
Oh,
Okay.
interesting. Okay.
It's just in my Zoom room, and if I log out and log back, I have to start the YouTube stream again, and it'll just be confusion. So if
Maybe it
either
doesn't
of you,
matter.
yeah, if either of you see that you're having a problem seeing each other, let me know.
Okay.
So do you
But
see
otherwise,
Maria?
I
Steve?
do. Oh, okay. I do.
Steve, do you see
no,
Maria? Oh, hi, Maria.
I don't.
We
Hi,
I
see
see,
everyone.
her.
I see that she's in the room, but I just don't get the video feed.
How weird. Maria, you see me and Nicole, right? Our video?
I do. Yep, I see
Okay.
everybody. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I think
All right.
Julie's coming on too.
I don't know. That's really weird, Steve.
I know. Well, Zoom is so darn stable so often that I'm not going to complain because this is not a game breaker, but it is weird.
No, especially since it seems like it's just impacting you.
Yeah, I know.
Steve, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm trying
I
to
hear you.
log on from a different computer, and it seems that I don't know what's going on here.
What's the problem?
Let me see, I'm cutting and pasting this, and it's just, I mean, I can use this computer that I'm on. I would prefer not to, but it's,
Yeah, so you got the special link from Zoom,
yeah.
and does your other computer use a different email address?
I got it. I got
Okay.
it, and I click on it, it says launch meeting and it doesn't do anything.
Zoom might be actually having a problem because you've missed some of the conversation here. I'm not actually seeing the video of the panelists. Do you see everybody else's video?
Yes.
Okay. So there may be something going on with Zoom.
Let
I
me,
can't tell you what it
okay.
is.
I
You
can,
could try
let me,
rebooting that computer, maybe.
yeah. Let me jump off. You are joining. Let's see. Okay.
So we're waiting on
Yeah.
Alexandra.
Join with video.
That's correct. Hey, Steve, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So,
All right, boom.
oh, good. Anthony, as you know, isn't going to be able to join us today. So when I do my little brief intro, who am I passing it over to?
You'll pass it over to Julius. And I took Anthony off the slide.
Okay.
So I'll just say I'm going to turn the time over to Dr. Hirsch from San Jose State University, and then you can go from there right to Julius.
Yes.
Okay, sounds great.
Testing,
Perfect.
testing. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Let me see. Can I hear myself? All right. All right. Now I have my radio voice on. All right. There we go.
That's awesome.
Okay, so does anybody know Alexandra well enough to know if we should be concerned that she's not here yet?
Let me text her now.
Okay. So again, just sort of a reminder, as soon as we know what's going on with Alexandra, I will actually turn the room on so people can start filing in, and we'll go radio silent, and then at the top of the hour, I'll start the introduction.
It sounds perfect.
So funny, I can't actually see any of you.
Don't worry, Louis look gorgeous and ready to go.
Okay, I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, we all look pretty spiffy.
All right.
Any word from Alexandra?
I texted her and I have not heard from her. Let me call her. She's on her way. She'll be here in just one moment, is what she said.
Right. Okay, so as soon as she gets here, I want to have us go silent and open the room. So Julius, is there anything you want to coordinate with your team before we end up going silent?
No, I think we're good. I think I'm just like we discussed, everybody, I'm gonna frame it and then we're gonna jump right into the conversation. And feel free, I'll monitor the time, but feel free to jump in and give your thoughts. And here's Alex.
Alex, do you want to test your mic?
Or I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay,
And
perfect.
can you guys see her?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
I
good.
have to say, I've been fighting with the light. I have these shades that drop in. I had to find something to put over because there was like a dapple of light right in the center of my face. So, excuse me.
I have the same problem in my office. There's nothing I can do though.
Right. I found a white sheet. That's part of why I was late.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
No, you look great.
thanks. I have to say I'm somewhat scripted today. I apologize. I know that it'll
Hey.
be more of a conversation, but I want to make sure I get my points in without rambling, which is my usual MO.
It's okay to be scripted.
Thank you for
Okay,
that.
so this is the point at which I'm probably going to suggest that we go quiet. Now that we have everybody here, and then I'll open the room. And at the top of the hour, so people can actually start coming in. At the top of the hour, I'll hit the record button, get us started. I'll be very quick. I'll turn the time over to Dr. Hirsch. She'll be very quick, and then she'll turn the time over to you, Julius. And everybody's mics are off, so that sounds good. Okay, I'm
Got it.
gonna open the room. Hi, it's Steve Hargadon, and welcome to another Library 2.0 mini conference, Library 2.023, EDI 2.0, Individual Responsibility for Creating Belonging and Connection in the Library Profession. Welcome, and thanks to our founding partner, the San Jose State University School of Information. We'll now take a minute and hear from Dr. Hirsch from San Jose State. Sandy, welcome.
Thank you, Steve. And I am Sandy Hirsch. I am the Associate Dean for Academics in the College of Professional and Global Education at San Jose State University. And on behalf of San Jose State University, I'm very pleased to welcome you today to this Library 2.0 mini conference. Today's conference is going to focus on equity, diversity, and inclusion, or EDI, within that library profession and how libraries can help create a sense of belonging and meaningful connection. We titled this mini conference EDI 2.0 rather than just EDI because we wanted to expand the EDI conversation to address what we as individuals can specifically do to help make changes in our libraries and in the library profession as a whole. I want to especially thank our partner for today's mini conference, Julius Jefferson. Julius is the current section head of the Research and Library Services section in the Foreign Affairs, Defense, and Trade Division at Congressional Research Service of the Library of Congress. He is also an internationally recognized leader, a past ALA president, and the inaugural IFLA North American Regional Chair. Over the years, his work has helped shape the library field's thinking around diversity, leadership, and professional development. Given his esteemed background, we're thrilled when he agreed to work with us in putting together this important mini conference. We are also grateful to him for organizing a really outstanding opening keynote session with a stellar set of speakers, which I'm honored to be included as part of that keynote panel. SJSU iSchool is proud to sponsor this important discussion, and I look forward to learning about strategies that individuals and libraries can use to improve the sense of belongingness and inclusion in their library organizations. I will now turn this over to Julius Jefferson to kick off the conference.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for that introduction, Sandy, and thank you for all your work in putting this together. I appreciate the opportunity. When you called, who says no to Dr. Hirsch? But this is a great opportunity to put together such a stellar panel. This is like my dream team. These are individuals that I've known in the profession for a long time. They are theorists, practitioners, and they're just some great folks. So I'm going to introduce the panel quickly, and then we're going to jump into a conversation. We hope that you will enjoy hearing from these thought leaders, library leaders. So first, I'll introduce Dr. Nicole A. Cook. She's the Augusta Baker Endowed Chair and an associate professor at the School of Library and Information Science at the University of South Carolina. Dr. Cook's research focuses on human information behavior, fake news, consumption, and resistance. She is also the founding editor of ALA Neil Schumann Critical Culture Information Studies book series, and she's a 2016 Equality Award winner. You just heard from Dr. Sandy Hirsch. She informed me that she is the Associate Dean for Academics in the College of Professional and Global Education at San Jose State University. She has had a stellar career within academia and within library associations. She's the past president of the Association for Library and Information Science Education and the Association for Information Science and Technology. She also holds leadership roles in ALA and is the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions, IFLA, with IFLA. So we will also introduce Dr. Maria McCauley. She is the Director of Libraries for the City of Cambridge. She served as the Director of Libraries in Santa Monica, Director of Libraries for the City of Somerville, and she has held several library positions at Northeastern University. She's a past president of the American Library Association, and she also served on the American Library Association's Executive Board. She's also a Spectrum Scholar. And certainly, last but not least, we have Alexandra Rivera. She is the Associate Dean for Diversity, Inclusion, and Organizational Development at Michigan State University Library. She coordinates the work of the Communications Unit, User Experience, Accessibility, Outreach, and Engagement. She is also the Vice President and President-elect of Reforma, the National Association for the Promotion of Library and Information Services to Latino and Spanish-speaking. And she serves as Vice President of the Joint Council of Librarians of Color. She is also on the American Library Association's council. She's a member at large and a past member of the ALA Executive Board. She is a 2018 Equality winner. And I mention these Equality winners because we happen to have 3 of them in our midst today. I happen to be one, so I joined them after they won it. So they inspired me. And that's the reason why they're here today and we're having this conversation. So before I ask the first questions, I just want to say that libraries as public spaces provide access to explore digital and print resources and are used to solve our information needs and our intellectual curiosity. Libraries also provide opportunities for public discourse and collaborations. And I think that's something that we all believe and we all know. But as human beings, we all have an innate need to feel included. We have an innate need to be a part of human activities. And humans have a need to feel like they belong. But the exclusive and divisive social climate that humans have created with race, with religion, with sexual orientation, disabilities, fosters spaces that I would deem are inhuman. But libraries have always been the one institution that every human will intersect with throughout the course of their life. They will connect with libraries. So from little children going to story time to children going to school and reaching out and engaging with their school librarian, to using the public library as a high school student, as well as your school library, or moving into the university setting and using college libraries. We even moved to using the National Library where I work. Libraries are going to be a part of our life always. So when we think about libraries and we think about this need to feel like we belong, feel like we're connected to these communities, I want to start the conversation by asking Dr. Cook, Nicole. So what can we do to create belongingness in the library for our colleagues as well as our users?
Yes, thanks so much. And it's a pleasure to be on this esteemed panel. I think where I want to go with this question is actually to take a step back and say, in order to create a sense of belonging for our colleagues and our patrons, we have to want to create that sense of belonging. And the reason that I do talk about it in this way is I think that essentially we would be hypocrites if we don't do the internal work that we expect and would like others to do. So for example, in the last couple of years, I've been on some professional committees surrounding EDI. Some address language, some address, different guidelines and things of that nature. And there have been real arguments within the profession to say, oh, that language is too strong. That language is too inflammatory. We don't want to talk about that because we don't want to upset anyone. And I just feel like if we're not willing to upset ourselves, then we're not ready to do this work, right? And so I think with things like developing cultural competence, establishing a real sense of cultural humility where we know that there's so much more for us to learn and do, those are key things to getting ourselves prepared to develop that sense of belonging. But I think we have to want to, and that's a slightly different conversation. The second thing I would say, I'm teaching a class on storytelling and social justice. And I had an amazing conversation with a student the other day who is afraid to tell their story because they don't want to offend someone else, right? So when we were discussing it, I said, it doesn't matter, right? We know that you're not necessarily intending to offend, but you can't suppress your own story and your own experience as a marginalized person to placate someone else who doesn't know better or perhaps does not want to know any better. So I think we have to be braver with our stories. And we have to develop a sense of humility and confidence within ourselves that we can then take to our community and our colleagues.
Wow, thank you. Any other thoughts from anyone else if we move on to the next question? And then that's a lot, that's quite a bit to unpack, but I think over the course of the next few hours, and that we'll be able to sort of unpack a lot of what you just shared with us. Anyone else? Okay, so yeah, I agree. We have to want to do this work. And so when we think about, being intentional and wanting to do this work, and certainly being brave about doing this work, Maria, how do we create a climate in our libraries where our users feel connected and they feel included in these library spaces?
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to speak both personally as well as from the view of being an administrator for a really long time. And I think that Dr. Cook brings up some really good points about really wanting to, and not just wanting to do it, but be willing to do the work. And this is one of the core questions, right? Creating an inclusive climate requires both an internal and external approach. And I think that the internal that I'm talking to is also related to what Dr. Cook has mentioned already. We need to make sure that we're doing the work and that we are supporting our staff so that they can provide services that are rooted in equity and that cultivate a sense of belonging, and create this climate that we're seeking in which people feel connected. And I would argue that equity work is the backbone of our library organizations, and they should be reflected in our mission, vision, values, and strategic priorities. At the Cambridge Public Library, we have a vision of a Cambridge where everyone has equitable opportunities to learn, people live their very best lives, and democracy thrives. Our values include access, diversity, people, and social justice. We acknowledge the systemic inequities that have shaped our society and take intentional action to create more equitable outcomes. And so I want to step back and go into some examples of some internal work that libraries can do, and I believe should be doing. One way to do this is to develop an organization-wide ways of being, or to co-create group norms, including inclusive meeting practices. And the idea around ways of being is to help to establish how we want to be in the community with each other based on our values and cultural context. And cultural humility is something that Dr. Cook mentioned. What do we want to hold as a group that relate to our external values as well? We need to be able to live our values. Ways of being might help us to address and move through tensions. And if anybody thinks that it's just going to be all, warm snuggles and affirmations at the library, that's not actually what the library is about. Part of our work is to move through tensions, right? And to help to improve our understanding of each other and how our behavior, how my behavior impacts others, how your behavior impacts others. So some examples of some ways of being might be things like be open to correction, lean into learning, speak your thoughts. So the courage piece that Dr. Cook is talking about, to listen fully and to hold each other with humanity. Another internal example is that we must revamp our hiring and promotional processes. If we say that hiring a diverse staff is important and staff that is reflective of our communities, we need to change. So what does that actually mean? What are some strategies, perhaps, that libraries can take? It might be making sure that you have diverse hiring panels, working with different community groups that are working with specific populations in the community. It might be talking to hiring managers about what does it actually mean when we think about an ideal ideal candidate? Is that like through your lens of your view of what you know, or is there a broadening of what an ideal candidate might look like? Who can actually do the job? Are we testing for who can actually do what is required for the job? Or are we testing based on interview perfection? So those are some possibilities that libraries can take on. And then I just want to move to beyond naming things in the framework. I also think that we need to move through in the public sphere. So we need to live our values, right? We need to actually take action in our values. So this includes services such as going fine free, providing social work services, providing digital equity, STEM learning opportunities, free menstrual products, accessible services, assistive technologies, and presenting and amplifying diverse authors and speakers. And so to sum up, I think that by living our commitments to anti-racism and inclusion and normalizing internal and external practices that support equity-centered missions, we will foster a climate in our libraries where both our staff and our users feel connected, included, and in touch with their shared humanity.
No, great points, Maria. And I want to kind of just push a little further before we go to our next question, because I like the way you framed it. You talked about internal and external. And when we think, and Nicole, you talked about you have to want to do this. But so often we are in environments where people are afraid to want to do the work because there's some reprisal, right? There is this idea, and I think it's a real idea, a real situation where if you do push back, if you want to do the work, you will be shifting the status quo paradigm, right? And that's what most individuals are trying to project, this idea of the status quo paradigm. Maria, you made some really good points when it comes to hiring. Because certainly when we say, we have many organizations that talk about we want a diverse workforce, but they look for candidates that can pass the test of the interview, not necessarily look at what they can really bring to the community. And I mean, I think that's one point I just want to highlight. But I want to go back to Nicole real quick before we move on. So Nicole, talk a little bit about the idea of wanting to do the work, but this fear of reprisal.
Yeah, it's real. And I will say that, I worked as an academic librarian. It was real in that setting. It's real as a faculty member, right? And so I do talk to students about, and other people about taking calculated risks, and also doing work in the collaborative, in the collective, right? So if there's something that you can't get done in your individual institution, maybe you go to Reforma. I've done a lot of work with BCALA. So there are lots of ways to affect change, positive change in the profession, even if you can't do it within your organization, right? So there's a lot of discussion about, really having good leadership, right? And that's where it comes down. So if you have that supportive leadership, there's a lot you can do. But if you don't, there's going to be a lot you can't do, right? And we can always lead from where we are. And I never want anyone to feel isolated, and that they can't do this work and that it's impossible. It's always impossible. Maybe it's just not possible in your particular venue, right? And so when I worked as a librarian, I was very active with the local BCALA chapter. I was very active with the State Library Association until I could figure out my way into ALA. And, we've got wonderful conferences like JCLC, Ideals, and a lot of other really just soul-filling conferences. And you go and you fill up and you let other people pour into you, and you get charged up. And that's how you can continue doing that work. But I never want to sugarcoat and say that reprisal isn't real. I'm personally sitting here in a red state where I have to, perhaps change some of the names of my classes, because of different politics. There's a certain level of subversiveness as well. We can do a lot of this work and just not name it, the things that people are looking for. So, I can talk about subversive strategies all day, but I do absolutely want to acknowledge reprisal. It is real. but it does not stop us from doing the work.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. And I want to bring in Sandy and Alex because we kind of talked about competencies and Maria, you framed the internal and the external, but a lot of the EDI work we see coming from our institutions. So really, what is the role of these EDI programs in our libraries and institutions? I mean, this whole idea of building an ecosystem and building competency. So let's start with Sandy and then let's hear from Alex.
Thank you, Julius. And yeah, I'd love to chat and kind of address some of this topic from the standpoint, particularly from library and information science programs and some of the ways that we need to be thinking about this topic from the standpoint of what education does in terms of preparing the next generation of library professionals for our field. And one of the things I've been hearing, from multiple library schools, but there is a lot of discussion around EDI, what library schools should be doing. There's discussion around things like decolonizing the curriculum, looking for ways to diversify and attract more diverse students and faculty, et cetera. I can speak specifically, more specifically about some of the things we're doing here at San Jose State to give a flavor for some of the kinds of activities and initiatives and important programs that are important for us to be considering and moving forward with in order to make some progress in this space. So specifically, one of the things that we've been doing at the college level just this past fall is we've launched a semester-long professional development program for faculty that's focused around achieving equitable student outcomes, with the goal of creating educational programming to address issues of diversity and also to work to remove systemic structural barriers or policies that are opposed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this is a semester-long course. We had a pilot program this fall, and I'm really excited that we're going to be expanding that program to more faculty starting in the spring. And I think this is one important step toward looking at our curriculum and our faculty and expanding the focus in the EDI space. Specifically at the iSchool level, the iSchool at San Jose State has had many EDI initiatives, but there are a few that I think that I wanted to highlight in particular. One is focused around students, which is make them feel comfortable and feel included and feel safe within the program. There's a whole series of Your Voices, EDI webinars, community learning spaces, and e-newsletters. Specifically, as I said, in terms of creating that safe space for students to be able to share, to gather, to learn, to listen, to share experiences related to their identity in a safe space that fosters innovation and creates an environment of belonging. And another thing I wanted to mention is around, the effort for the faculty to be taking a continuous look at the curriculum to identify ways that to identify in what ways the courses are being infused with concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And for over a decade, the iSchool has been assessing this on an annual basis because of the importance of creating those, to focusing on those topics. I think that these efforts just in general are important for LIS programs. As I said, it's critical that we're preparing that next generation of information professionals that without those strong values that reflect the broader communities that they live and work in, and also to ensure that after they graduate, that they conduct themselves in the workplace and professional communities in ways that build upon and support belonging, connection in the profession. I'll stop there and I'll address the competencies and standards a little bit later.
Okay. No, thank you. Thank you, Sandy. Alex, we want to bring you in here for the same question.
Thank you. I am so delighted to be a part of this conversation and to be in community with all of you. I've given a lot of thought to this, and I'll explain why in a moment. Equity, diversity, and inclusion, when programmatically incorporated into libraries and institutions, is intended to create a foundation or structure that will enhance diversity and foster equity and inclusion in its staff, resources, services, and ultimately create a sense of belonging for our library workers and patrons. But it needs to be intentional. It's not to be left to chance. And I've seen so many different models implemented within academic institutions across the country. There are a few key elements that must be in place to ensure that they are effective, impactful, and sustainable. And I want to share these with you. The first element is having an EDI leader who is responsible for guiding these activities within the organization. This position must have agency through a direct link to administration, specifically a seat at the table, reporting directly to the dean or director. This is the difference between proposing action or enacting it. By working with leadership, one is able to make permanent change that addresses systemic racism and inclusion and exclusion. An additional outcome is that it ensures that at least one person is collaborating with administrators, our peers, in helping them to understand the importance of EDI to their work as leaders and to the organization and profession. This also ensures that EDI is considered throughout the high-level decision-making processes. Oftentimes, it's one of those things that is just not often thought about. The second element is resources. This must include a budget to implement programs such as professional development opportunities and events and exhibits and services such as a wellness lending library, which is something my own library made available when we returned back to work. All of these activities build our competence in working towards diversity, equity, and inclusion, and ultimately social justice. Where an organization chooses to spend its money is a clear indication of what they value. Historically, EDI initiatives are the first thing to be cut when budgets are tight or politically unpopular, but we will leave that for another day. And the third thing is to ensure that the values of EDI are at the center of the work of the institution, similar to what Maria stated, should be present in the mission, the vision, our values. Quite often, organizations create a strategic plan and then have a separate diversity strategic plan. And I think it's critical that EDI is woven into the fabric of everything that we do. This results in resources and services that reflect with dignity the communities and individuals we serve and ensures that we're effectively meeting the information needs of our ever increasingly diverse patrons. In my institution, all of these elements are available to me in varied degrees. I'm fortunate to head a division that's composed of several units and comprised of an excellent staff for which EDI is integral. And as Julia stated earlier, they include accessibility, communications, engagement and outreach, organizational development, and even web user experience. I also have a lot of willing partners throughout my library, including a diversity advisory committee, a harmful language remediation task force, and more. But it's important that everyone sees EDI initiatives and creating a sense of belonging as part of their responsibility. And one person cannot change culture. It's created together. And that's something that I often emphasize. In fact, it was part of my job talk when I interviewed for the position. The fourth thought on how my position was structured was what attracted me to even consider taking a job such as this. I am a reluctant leader. And I feel, however, that if opportunities are given to improve our practice and affect positive change, we have the responsibility to embrace it, especially if we are able to provide a diverse perspective that challenges the norm of predominantly white and colonized institutions, such as what exists in higher education and libraries. Seeking ways to embed EDI practice throughout our organization, removing barriers and building bridges is the gist of what I do. I chose to move into this role that provides an opportunity to address systemic problems that are prohibitive to inclusivity and that foster creative, vibrant environments that value all the communities that we serve, including our staff and our users. I consider my staff my customers. While my experiences are in academic library, I hold that EDI programs should be instituted across the library ecosystem, and more importantly, that we should be supporting one another in this work. We do not live in a vacuum. Our pre-K through 12th grade students, and even, at birth, they and their parents are also our public library users and potentially our academic library patrons, as well as our future faculty, our LIS professors, perhaps a university regent or a member of our Friends of the Library Board, and definitely our donors, our government representatives. The list goes on and on. But I think you understand what I'm saying. We need to be working collaboratively and engaging all of our networks, similar to what Nicole said, finding our communities, utilizing the resources that are there, building those resources, and collaborating together to ensure that we are creating a sense of belonging, and our libraries are ones that are truly open to all members of society.
Thank you, Alex. But I want to further this before we move on, move back to Sandy to talk about EDI standards. So we think about these EDI programs in our institutions. Some of these institutions are very old as the country, or older. We have created a culture within our institutions that seems to believe that, if we say we have an EDI program, that this will kind of solve the problem. And I remember several years ago, I did a program about diversity programs in libraries, right? And my question was, do they really work? I mean, really, is it that simple as, and I'm not saying that it wasn't a great idea. Somebody like Dr. Hirsch, Dr. McCauley, in a position of leadership can say, we're going to do this, right? But we end up seeing that we have a resistant workforce or even community to wanting to have this change. So Dr. Cook said, we have to want to do this work. Certainly, a lot of us in these spaces want to do this work. That's why we're here. We've done the work. That's exactly why you're all here. But how do you combat a very large institution who says, yes, we're going to hire someone, we're going to put a little bit of money into it, and then you still find resistance in very micro communities within the institution?
I love that question. I bet you all of us have some solutions, right? I will say that you're not going to get everybody on board, but if you can get the majority at least thinking about it, I think that as you start to learn, you can't necessarily unlearn it. So as you're exposed, these things will still be present in your mind. But when you talk about programming, I would say diversity programming is one tool in a toolkit. And when you're thinking about learning theory, you need to move beyond just the program and provide opportunities for people to be able to engage and apply what they're learning. So it means developing projects and setting expectations for outcomes, knowing that EDI is going to have to be applied. There is, they're building on strengths, identifying where your strengths lie, and building on those tend to build momentum. And if there's energy and momentum, people want to be there. So again, there may be some who are naysayers, but I will say that we've proven that we can change. And I think that there is a mindset, a swelling mindset in our communities to want to do better. Maybe I'm a Pollyanna, but I think hope is integral to this work. You cannot do this work or begin to affect change unless you truly believe that it's possible, and hope is core to that. And I want to hear what my colleagues say on this.
Anybody else want to share? Okay.
I'll come back. I'll come back to that one in a little bit. There's more on that one. So much to unpack there, Alex. But I want to bring Sandy back in. And Sandy, I want you to share how EDI standards influence or shape our sense of belongingness.
Yeah, thank you, Julius. And thank you to my colleagues. All the points that you're making are so important and really fit well with, I think, some of the things I'll be talking about now as well. So basically, I think of standards as being an explicit codification of our values and our expectations that we feel are essential for our library profession. And they can have a very strong impact on the conduct, the expertise, the behavior, the sense of inclusion and belonging in our profession. I wanted to talk about two specific recent standards updates that I think will have a big impact on the future of our profession. One is related to updates that are underway related to the ALA standards for accreditation of master's programs in library and information science. And the other focuses, it's not technically a standard, but it is a policy around ALA core competencies for librarianship. So first, let me just talk about the accreditation standards. These have been accreditation standards are the standards by which library and information science programs are assessed and measured against, and based on the determination if they meet the standards, then will be granted that they have achieved accreditation. And over the past few years, there have been some efforts to revise the last standards that we have in place, which are from 2015. And one of the most significant changes to these proposed standards for the accreditation standards has been to add an explicit reference to equity, diversity, and inclusion as an essential part of how MLIS programs will be reviewed for accreditation. Specifically, as the Committee on Accreditation states, the values of EDI are referenced throughout the standards because of their importance when framing goals and objectives, designing curricula, selecting and retaining faculty and students, and allocating resources. What I think is really important about these revised standards for accreditation in terms of how they incorporate EDI is that it's not just a single standard that has been added to the accreditation standards, but really it's interspersed throughout all 5 of the standards, including specific references to EDI in multiple subsections of each standard. And a lot of the points that have been raised here in terms of what we're hearing in practice or in theory are actually reflected in these standards as well. So for example, the revised standards require that MLIS programs incorporate values of EDI into their mission and goals, like what Maria was talking about, and I think Alex was talking about, and into their program learning outcomes and curriculum, as well as consider EDI and faculty hiring and development practices and student recruitment and student support. These are really important aspects, and I think will have a huge impact on that sense of belonging, connection in the programs. A special vote for the ALA Council to adopt these standards is scheduled for November 30th. So these have not been adopted yet, but are forthcoming, hopefully in a couple of weeks, we'll see these changes reflected. But as I said, I think that these are significant and will have a big impact because as I mentioned before, MLIS programs prepare the next generation of library professionals. So integrating the EDI values and concepts so deeply embedding that throughout all aspects of the program will provide an important foundation for the way that these future library professionals will engage in libraries. And I also think that these changes will help to shine a light on the importance of inclusion within library and information science programs themselves for all the various key constituents, like students, for faculty and staff as a whole. The other one, if I have a few more minutes, just a couple more minutes, I wanted to address the ALA core competencies of librarianship. I had the pleasure of chairing the ALA Committee on Education when we brought these new updated core competencies forward for approval by ALA Council just earlier this year in January 2023. The purpose of these core competencies of librarianship is to offer professional standards for the library and information science profession, and to provide guidance regarding some of the content and skills that should be addressed in library and information science curriculum. And specifically, these core competencies, they codify the essential skills, knowledge, and abilities expected of professional librarians and allied professionals. And as I mentioned, they've just been recently updated. So now there are 9 competencies that list specific knowledge and abilities related to each one. So one of the very significant changes, there were many, but one of the big changes that were made to these core competencies with this big update was the addition of a whole new competency that was focused on social justice. And key elements found within that core competency include, for example, understanding one's own cultural identity and recognizing, challenging, and changing practices that have traditionally replicated dominant systems and marginalized others. There's a detailed rationale that goes into more specifics, as well as foundational skills and understanding that outlines what is expected of library professionals in terms of what their value, how to conduct themselves, and what competencies they need to master with specific skills. So why is this important to this conversation, and to how will this influence or shape our sense of belongingness? I think by adding this new core competency around social justice, the core competencies make explicit the importance of diversity and inclusion for library professionals in their work and behavior. And I think this will have effects on lots of different types of people, people who are early in their library career who may be using these core competencies perhaps as a list of goals to achieve within their experiences. It could maybe influence hiring practices in terms of encouraging those who are in positions of hiring, like we've been talking about here in this conversation, to consider a broader impact of competencies and different types of the social justice aspect can be incorporated into the ethos of the hiring practices. And then also library and information science faculty will be looking to these competencies as a way to update LIS curriculum, and so may have influence again into curriculum development. So back to you, Julius.
Yes, no, thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I want to point out one thing about the competencies for accreditation, because we often kind of think, sometimes these ideas and this action comes out of nowhere, but it was very intentional. And I can tell you, because it came out of an experience when I was serving as ALA president, and actually Alex and Maria were both on the board when this came about. And there was a situation with individuals working at a library school, and they felt that they were being discriminated against, and they had filed a lawsuit, and they didn't get the outcome that they wanted. And they really wanted ALA as an entity to do something about it, but ALA had no standing to intervene into their specific situation. But sometimes when we do this work, and you're going to hear me talk about this later, and like Nicole started out by saying, you have to want to do it. We had folks on the board that wanted to do it. I can tell you that we had an executive director, Tracy Hall, as well as a president-elect, Patty Wong, who wanted to, we really felt like we wanted to do something about the situation. And we thought the only way we can really help was to take a look at the accreditation standards within library schools. And then make EDI a part of how we evaluate these institutions. It should, as you stated, Sandy, it should be part of the mission, the vision, the values of the institution. Absolutely. And when we took a look at it, it really wasn't. You didn't really see it or hear about it. And so certainly it's a first step. It's a first step. It's sort of like what Alex talked about with these programs. It's a first step
but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done to make sure that we hold these institutions accountable moving forward. So, I mean, I am very, very pleased that we have that first step and we have something to actually work towards. So I want to shift the conversation a little bit, and I want to go back to Nicole, because Nicole, you do a significant amount of research, you edit, you write. So what research is needed to help shape this conversation and really shift this paradigm from a culture, what I would say, a culture of exclusion? Someone asked what inclusion is. Well, it's the opposite of exclusion, basically, right? A culture of exclusion, what I think we see in many of our institutions. Certainly we see this played out on the evening news every single day, a culture of exclusion, to a culture of belonging within our library spaces. So, I mean, what should we be researching? You know, where should we be going in terms of thinking about this?
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to mention really briefly, because I do think it relates to the current question, with the competencies and the standards. Let's not forget that we are in a profession that is 85% white women, right? And so I've been on a lot of these committees that Sandy's referenced, and had pushback, right? So I always, joke and say the call is coming from inside the house. So there's still a lot of work that we need to do inside the profession. So Maria mentioned it earlier about making sure our search committees are equitable and diverse. We need to make sure our internal committees are equally diverse, right? So now we had some real progress made with the current accreditation standards, but now we need to make sure we get the right panel members who are going to accredit these programs and make sure that these new standards are actually being followed. But to get to the research, and I think Alex will appreciate this because it gets back to her previous question, there are two things, actually three things that I have in mind in terms of what we need to be doing in terms of research to shift the paradigm. One is to acknowledge our history and to highlight our history. We've got a significant history of racism and segregation, and it can't continue to be swept under the rug. Right. I think Maria again said it's not all snuggles here as much as I wish it was. So that's one thing. Secondly, I would love to see more autoethnography. And that autoethnography is when people are writing about their own experiences and they're writing about their own environments and things of that nature. And so it's a way to reprioritize voices that have been previously excluded and oppressed. And let other people know what's really happening, right? So, my colleagues might not know what happens in South Carolina, just like I might not know what happens in Cambridge or Michigan or California, right? So we need to be sharing more of these stories. And to Alex's point, some of the research that we do with EDI, inclusion, and belonging is going to have some level of interest convergence. And by interest convergence, I mean that those who are not part of minoritized communities have to see some value in the research. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not saying that the research that has been done does not have value. I'm saying other people don't see the value. And so, we have so much gatekeeping in the library literature and in publishing, right? That's a whole other conference. And I've got colleagues of color who are doing amazing work. But because there is some mention of their positionality or because they're studying a minoritized group, the journal comes back and says, well, that's an area of limited interest, so we're not going to publish that, right? So, and I've had the same colleague remove the ethnic group from the study. It was accepted right away, right? So, and I'm not saying that we need to rig this publishing system, but there has to be some level of interest convergence to even be heard. Right. So there's a lot happening, but I would certainly say more personal stories, more history. And again, like I opened with, being braver with these stories to get everyone to see the social justice imperative in this work.
Thank you, Dr. Cook. It's so funny that you I guess it's not funny, but it's interesting that you kind of mentioned the fact that the profession is predominantly of white women.
And when I talked about a few seconds ago how that particular executive board really saw the need to do something to help individuals at the LIS programs deal with diversity, and came up, move the accreditation standards. It was with a board that was predominantly people of color or marginalized people. And so I don't think it was a coincidence that we were able to see the need to do that work. And I mean, thank you for pointing that out. It was, from the executive director to the president-elect to the rest of the board members, we all saw and felt that something needed to be done. Even if we couldn't change it, something needed to be done. So thank you for pointing that out, because it's very true. Okay, so we have a few more minutes. I want to kind of ask a question, a broad question, and you kind of have all talked a significant amount about, what happens at your institution. But this whole idea, this whole conference, this whole idea is really taking some individual responsibility. I did give an example of what the accreditation standards of individual responsibility, that was the whole entire ALA executive board of 2020, 2021. And so we all took that responsibility. But what role do we as individuals have in creating a sense of belongingness in our libraries? What roles do we have personally? And certainly, I want to preface that by stating that it should not always be marginalized individuals taking on this responsibility, right? I mean, it should be anyone who is a human being that believes that every human being should be treated as such. So what role do we have? I'll start with Maria, and then we can kind of get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, we all know what it feels like to not belong, right? We've been there. It's important to remember, I think, those feelings of not belonging when we're trying to do the work. I certainly feel that way a lot of times, and I have to recenter, but it helps me when I'm trying to change the system. I also believe is that we do need to create, in order for us to create a sense of belonging, we do need to lead with humanity and with empathy. And the question was asked before, what do you do? I think Julius asked it. What do you do when you find resistance? So having the courage to speak up, or finding allies who will speak up on your behalf. I also think that it's really important to offer solutions based on where others might be coming from. So it might be, have you considered this? It might be a solution to help you with better alignment of espoused institutional values, right? Like, are we out of alignment, and can we help that situation in a way that might be helpful versus put people on the defensive? And then I think we need to also upskill on how to use power and on power structures and theory. And I think I'll just close by saying, as individuals, we have the responsibility to try to model the change we want to see and to change the models, even when it's difficult.
Absolutely. Thank you, Maria. Anyone else? Alex.
I love everything that Maria said, and it's much of how I think about my own personal responsibility about creating a sense of belongingness, not just in our libraries, but everywhere I go. So I think it's really critical to be authentic. I just took to heart what Nicole said about being brave and telling your story, because I actually found myself I was doing a training this morning where I withheld, we were talking about social identities and how they impact the way we see the world. And I was giving I went through the identities grid, and I gave a lot of information, but I withheld some that are more personal. But I do think that there is a time and a place to be able to share these things. People need to be ready to hear them. I think had I shared some of what I've experienced, people would have been in shock. You know, we've all experienced some different hardships, and so thinking about how to deliver messages so that they can be heard, recognizing that we're all on a spectrum of learning and growing, and who we are now is somebody different than who we were in one sense. You know, when, you know, I'll speak personally, when I was that wild 18-year-old and maybe even 30-year-old, but but I do think that it's important to recognize that when you step into these leadership roles, you're setting an example. People look to you to model what you're doing, and it means being authentic, being brave, and recognizing the power that you hold. I've been, you know, repeatedly surprised at people actually paying attention and maybe reciting something that they've heard me say. I'm like, wow, you know, they were paying attention, they listened. So our actions are huge, and it's important too to remain curious and open and encourage this in others. So I'm going to stop there in the interest of time, but thank you for that opportunity to share.
Absolutely. What about you, Sandy? Thoughts?
Thank you. Yes, and I just want to say +1, +1, like everything that they just said, I wholeheartedly agree with, and they said it so beautifully. I guess I'll just amplify it just by saying that I think it is important for us to keep asking ourselves, what changes can we as individuals make to better ensure representation, inclusion, equity, and access? And then, as Julius was talking about, take some specific action. You know, it can be something really small. It can be something that takes a whole year or longer, like Julius said. But in other words, I do think we need to think about belongingness as something that we all own and have some responsibility to contribute to. And it's not just something for leaders or managers to be. I mean, certainly they need to be thinking along those lines too, but we all need to be contributing to that environment, and that we all play a critical role.
Yes, thank you. Nicole, last thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. Like Sandy, +1 to all of the things. I think in addition to just reiterating this idea of having a sense of cultural humility, I think that we need to, on top of being brave, we need to stand in who we are. And by that, I mean, bravery does not come without a cost, right? I've been called the angry Black woman and uncivil and all of these things. And at the end of the day, I have to look at myself in the mirror. I have to be able to sleep at night, and I have to do what's right. Right. And accept that cost, and understand who I am, and know that the things that they're saying are their defense mechanisms, and, you know, they're microaggressions, but does not reflect who I am and the work that I need to do, and the importance of the work that we are all doing. So stand on yourself.
Absolutely. So just final remark here, that I want everyone to know that being intentional, being brave is how I selected this group of great library leaders and great colleagues. Of course, you can see that if there's such thing as a marginalized group, they fit many categories here. But what I really want you to know is they have overcome a significant amount of adversity, and to lead and make our profession better for everyone else. Each one of these individuals that you've heard from today has done that. I know for a fact. I've worked with them. They have put themselves on the line, and in some instances their careers on the line, to make those type of choices so everyone else can feel like they can be included, they belong. And that's how I wanted to start off this conference, with sharing the thoughts of these individuals with all of you. So I hope that you took notes, that we can continue the conversation with the other presentations. I will circle back at the very end and share some final remarks. But I can tell you that a lot of my final remarks, I think my colleagues saw some of my notes because they actually did really share some of my final remarks. But it just goes to show you that, I mean, we're all in this together, everyone. We're all in this together. And we're passionate about change. And so we hope you can feel our passion for change as we move forward with the rest of this conference and absolutely beyond. So thanks, everybody. We're right at the top of the hour. So we're going to move right into the sessions. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Alex. And of course, we have to thank Steve for making sure the trains were on time.
Thanks, Julius. Thanks. Terrific panel. Yes, please do jump out of this room and jump right to the next set of sessions because the presenters are in there and they're ready to go. Take care now. Bye.